Welcome back to another webisode of Unpeeled, where we are talking everything in the film industry, and we have a lot to break down. With movie theaters across the country shutting down due to the ongoing battle with COVID-19, many film studios are now facing challenging decisions of their own. The release of many highly anticipated blockbusters have been pushed back until at least June, while a number of films with original summer releases have not changed their schedule in hope of social distancing measures being reduced by the summer months. At the same time, many films that were slated to release in March and April have been made available for in-home viewing, including the controversial thriller The Hunt and the DreamWorks sequel Trolls World Tour. Joining us now for more updates on the changing movie landscape is Unpeeled Film Reporter Andrew Goldberg. Andrew, first and foremost, how are you doing in this whole quarantine situation?
Hey, Liam, good to see you again. I'm doing all right. I have plenty of time to catch up on some old movies that I haven't been able to watch recently. So, I'm trying to take as many silver linings as I can out of this. So, struggling a little bit like everyone, but trying to make the best of it.
Well, it's good to hear that you're making the best of it. And as you said, you're watching a lot of old movies, and unfortunately, those new movies that were slated to come out, that might be a while before we can see
Yep.
those in theaters. So I got to ask, what are some of the big name films that have already pushed back their release dates, and when can movie fans expect to see them actually in theaters?
Yeah, that's the topic that's really on everyone's mind right now. I mean, no movie, no matter how big a budget or big of a studio backing behind it, has been safe through this entire process with everything changing. So a number of big name films have been forced to push back their release dates, including Disney's live action Mulan, the new Wonder Woman 1984 film slated to come out, Jordan Peele's Candyman, Wes Anderson's The French Dispatch, and the new Black Widow movie, which has also been forced to push back all the way until the fall. So a number of movies that were slated to be released either around this time or early summer, they've all had to push back their release dates.
And it's wild too, because you mentioned Black Widow. That has a ripple effect on the entire Marvel release slate, as all their
Mhm.
movies, domino effect, have been pushed back. Now, not every studio has decided to change its release schedule. Which films are staying put, and why are some of these studios hesitant to move their release dates?
Yeah, every studio or or the distributor has been sort of taking their own path with how to handle this situation. Some films have not moved yet from their original release date. The earliest one that I found was Soul, the new Pixar movie set to come out, and it was kind of interesting because from their situation, they're not only dealing with that film, but since it's a Pixar film, they have to deal with every Disney Pixar movie slated to come out in the next year. So they can't just move their release date easily because then, like you said with Marvel, that has a ripple effect on all the other films, and they don't want to hedge one film against the other. So they're really hoping, I believe they're slated to come out in June. They're optimistic that they can still reach that date, although I'm not so sure because the way things are looking right now, with all the other films having been pushed back to at least the fall, they might be forced to change. But a couple other films that are also right now sticking to the original dates. Christopher Nolan's Tenet, a highly anticipated thriller that's looking to come out, I believe, in August or sometime in late to midsummer, and also The King's Man, the latest in the Kingsman series. Those films have stuck to the release dates. It's a lot of work to change it. I mean, there's a whole premiere scheduled around it, the budget, all the planning that goes into that one date. Market research about why box office revenue is higher in a certain time period than others. All that stuff goes into a film's release. And now with the pandemic going around, all that sort of has to be changed on the fly. So these films are really hoping that they can stick to their original dates, but no one's really sure right now.
It is very uncertain times, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of factors that go in. Do you start marketing a film that's supposed to come out in August, or do you hold all that trailer footage in hopes that we save it for a later release date? But I'm very interested into the films that are already out. Now, many have decided to go straight to video on demand. How
Mhm.
can viewers find these films, and which ones have been doing well so far in this new format?
Right. So, like you said, for the films that are already slated to be released either in this coming month or in the past month, they haven't really had a choice. They've been forced to find another avenue to distribute their features, and they've been going to video on demand. Viewers can find them either on their local cable services on demand, like Comcast. If you just search on demand, you can find it there. Also, Amazon Prime Video, Vudu, Google Play. The price right now is around $20 to $25, which I mean seems like a lot, but also you have to factor in that this is what you'd most likely be paying if you were seeing this movie in theaters, and these films need to recoup that money that they spent producing it. So kind of a tough situation for everyone. But so far, some films have been doing well. The Vin Diesel feature Bloodshot has been leading the pack, another good sign for superhero movies and intellectual property driven content. Also, The Invisible Man, that did have some theatrical run in which it did pretty well before everything was forced to shut down. That's been carrying over and still doing pretty well on demand. NBC's Emma has been doing pretty solid. The Harley Quinn movie is still seeing some effects of its box office success carrying over. So some movies that were set to be released in the past are still hanging in there and doing okay, but obviously not as well as they probably would have had they had a full theatrical release.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, these films start in theaters and then they expect to have that box office carry over. Maybe they make back their money in their first couple of weeks, but they have
Right.
time to make
Plus international distribution, that's a whole other wave that's being lost. It's a really tough situation for all these films.
Yeah, we saw that to begin with the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die. That was the first film pulled before anything got shut down in America, but because they realized they couldn't release in China, and that's a big portion of their box office. China has
Right.
1 billion people in that country.
But now MGM's looking real smart because they solidified their future release date before the rest of the pack. So they were able to stave off whatever potential losses they would have had if they had kept their original release date and had more time then to plan for pushing it to the future. And that's a major, major investment for that company. So they need everything to go right with that film. So right now they're looking pretty smart compared to some of the others who are either sticking to their date or just hoping optimistically that they don't have to change things.
For sure. The territorial nature of these release dates, people don't really realize how competitive it is to get those prime the first weekend or the weekend in August or even November when Oscar season comes around. But one thing I
Right.
did want to touch on is we've covered this on Unpeeled for the entire year, the rise of streaming service. And now with theaters shutting down and companies being forced to pivot a little bit, do you expect more studios their films to video if the current situation goes longer than expected? And kind of a two-part question: if they find in video on demand, do you think that more films could just live on video on demand and streaming services exclusively without ever having a theatrical run?
Right. So the first part of the question, I think yes, more films in these next couple months will be forced to go to video on demand, only because right now even the government isn't really sure of how long this is going to last and how quickly people will be able to get out and into the theaters again. So I think these studios, they can't risk banking everything on social distancing going away and the theaters opening back up, and they have to sort of hedge their bets and go on demand so people can watch in their homes and they can recoup some of the budget they spent producing these films. Because if they just go all in on the theaters in say June and things are still not looking great in June, then they could be looking at a complete disaster that could really bankrupt some of the smaller studios if they're putting a lot on their films. So I think they have to take the safe bet and continue to go on demand just because that's where the people are right now. And to the second part of your question, I think we've already sort of seen the shift to streaming in the past few years without a global pandemic going on, just because you can get more eyes on your picture. It's so much more accessible. You get a more reassured bet with someone like Netflix, who people have not only heard of, but if they promote it, they can promote it highly. It comes up on their screen right away, gets people talking, and all of a sudden, if you're scrolling through Netflix, you see this feature, you might give it a shot, whereas you would never really get that ordinarily in theaters where, no one just goes to a movie theater really not knowing what they're going to see. I mean, some people might, but it's much smaller percentage of people. So I think this is going to help streamers. It's one of the unintended consequences, and I don't really think they need the help because they've already been doing well. But I could see theaters already were on thin ice. This could only hurt them more.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very crazy situation, especially for movie theaters. We saw recently AMC might have to file for bankruptcy as they're already a lot in debt and this might push them over the edge. I did want to end on a more of a positive note. This situation, we know it's going to end eventually. Let's say once the situation is over, all the movies that were supposed to come out in the summer and in the spring have hit theaters. What is Andrew Goldberg going to see first?
Well, if Tenet is actually coming out when it's supposed to come out, I will definitely be in the theater for that one. I mean, I'll pretty much see anything Christopher Nolan makes, and they've been very secretive about this coming picture, but from what I've seen so far, it looks very, very exciting. And I know that's going to be at the top of my list. Also, Candyman. I mean, I know Jordan Peele isn't actually directing this feature, but he's been on such a roll lately that I feel like any movie fan has to at least watch the next feature he puts out. So I'll definitely be excited to see how those films do when they're released. And those are the type of movies that I really do hope fans can watch in the theater, because while they're great anywhere, you really can't get the same experience watching it in a crowded theater and surround sound, total experience versus in your living room. It's just not the same in my opinion. So I'm really hoping not only for these films, but for the industry as a whole, fans will be able to get out there and watch their favorite movies in the theaters again.
Both of those I definitely want to see. Jordan Peele has the Midas touch, and Christopher Nolan. I've been listening to a lot of scores and soundtracks recently. Interstellar and Dunkirk have some of the best I've ever. And The Dark Knight too. Don't sleep on The Dark Knight score.
Oh yeah.
For the sake of mixing it up, I'm gonna say A Quiet Place Part 2. I think that film looks fantastic, and similar to what you said, being in a theater for that has a whole different experience than just being in your living room.
Oh my God, it's part of the experience. It's what makes the movie so different. It's watching complete silence in a room full of other people. It's a very unique experience.
Absolutely. Well, Andrew Goldberg, thank you for joining us on this week's webisode. We'll be sure to webisodes every week for the rest of what was supposed to be our semester, and we'll keep you updated on all the entertainment news to know. Other than the webisodes, you can tune into the Unpeeled podcast, which is also available on YouTube. This week was hosted by Chris Sachi and Megan Reynolds, and they get into a whole different topics, from Selena Gomez talking about her bipolar disorder, to the XFL shutting down, to the MLB possibly getting resurrected, to even some other stuff in the entertainment world. I'll keep those secretive for now, but make sure you guys tune in to the podcast. Keep supporting Citrus TV, keep supporting Unpeeled, and we will see you next time.